Welcome back to the home studio and welcome to yet another episode of the Stevie Richards Show. This one here is going to be a multi-part special. Part one is going to talk about the rise of the right to censor. Part two, of course, you know how it ends, the downfall, the ending of the right to censor. And both these episodes, this one's for you, James, will be for your own good.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
Ha ha!
Am I just doing that more now?
The Jeff Jarrett laugh?
Well, apparently so. You make me self-conscious. I'm getting a tick now. I'm just going to do it more. Oh, dearie me. Yeah, hello everybody, I'm James. So just so everybody knows, my frames per second is lower than usual because of boring technical issues that involve my computer crashing and I'm having to run this through my laptop. But yes, we are going to be talking about right to censor. And this is because the fans have demanded it. I did a community post a short while ago asking what you want to hear. And this was the number one topic. So why not have a proper deep dive, as we do deep dives on this thing, and enjoy ourselves and how much you enjoyed yourself in Right to Censor. In fact, you told me off air, they're just like, oh, it was a dark time at times of Right to Censor. So I don't know the reason, so I'm fascinated to find out why.
Well, if we want to talk about how much I enjoyed that time in my life, listen to the silence for 4 seconds. There you go. Hey, it's a very much the biggest opportunity in my whole career, maybe the biggest opportunity since then, in regards to kind of like even sniffing that upper mid card or main event spot, either with myself or obviously the entire group. But there was a lot of struggles and a lot of things I was exposed to as far as backstage stuff that was the more negative side of professional wrestling, especially WWE. So, but it was definitely a great learning experience that set in a lot of maybe hyper accountability type of traits in me now. Like I went the exact opposite way that I was then. And we're going to talk about that. One of the things, the major weight gain and the reasons behind it, no excuses, but, reasons and things that I let get to me personally and professionally. So, where do you want to start? Do you want to start with basically the background of, because people might think, well, RTC, right to censor, it just kind of came out of nowhere, but there was a legitimate motivation of Vince McMahon and a legitimate reason for him to do this. Because much like a lot of things, the change, and I'll let you elaborate and tell the story from, a news perspective. It was just, once again, Vince McMahon in kind of the fight for WWE's survival. Maybe not as much as what we had with the WCW versus WWE Monday Night Wars, but there was a group that was really trying to starve out WWE in an advertising, income sense.
So there were a couple of things before, and you're referring to the Parents Television Council, of course, before this, they really get involved. And the first one is sort of like an inkling of like censorship that I believe is a Vince Russo idea. Gold Dust, Dustin Runnels burnt his, I don't know if you remember, like April, May, somewhere around that time, he used to have a sleeveless Gold Dust outfit. This was after months of dressing up in the most crazy Marilyn Manson kind of outfits and that kind of thing, and gimp ball gag and green leather kind of thing. Anyway, he burns the Gold Dust outfits and then declares the gimmick dead, and then for a few weeks he becomes actually one of the biggest baby faces on television, just as Dustin Runnels. And then on a dime he switches to become a pious, sort of holier-than-thou Christian character, worried about the morality that is being corrupted on WWF television at the time. Then the Goldust character would return in the autumn of 1998, so it was pretty short-lived. It didn't really do Dustin any good. Then in late 1999, and this is something I only found out today, on a few select episodes of WWF television, I knew this bit about the punchline, a large bald man would walk around WWF arenas holding up signs like WWF is immoral. And I remember this specifically because it was in the WWF magazine of 2000, February. I actually had a picture of the guy with WWF as moral as a sign. Anyway, he did this for a few episodes in November 1999, around that time, and then disappeared again. Turns out that the bald guy was David Koechner, a.k.a. Champ Kind from Anchorman. How did I never know that David Koechner was part of this. I mean, did you ever meet him? Was this?
No, I
Was he
never met him.
famous
This
at
is
the
the
time?
guy who plays the really lewd salesperson in The Office as well, right? The U.S. version. So, no, I never met him. And you're talking about the timeline, late 99, early 2000. I was kind of not really booked all that much. I might have come in and did like the secondary shows, Jack, Metal, once in a while on Raw or SmackDown doing the parody gimmick, impersonating Edge and Christian, impersonating Dude Love, all this stuff leading up. June 2000 is when I cut my hair and became Stevie Richards before the right to censor. I believe they cut my hair in Worcester, Massachusetts in June. And then from that point on, it was a parody of the Parent Television Council. But I don't remember this at all, man. You have a really good memory, or it just stuck out because you must be an Anchorman fan, right? So it's definitely, it's funny, like hiring a guy like that at that point. Was he even on The Office then, or was he just a kind of a pay-by-hire
UK version of
extra
The
actor?
Office didn't exist at this point. I mean, I don't even know if David Koechner was like particularly famous at this time, but he just wandered around the arenas. And specifically, I remember that magazine, and I always thought it was a genuine guy from the Parents Television Council or something similar. I actually thought, it was like genuine picketing. But this, I believe, is essentially around the same time that the Parents Television Council got involved with WWF affairs and the television programs. So why would Vince McMahon allow this on his shows, this character? So as a little bit of background, since 1999, Vince McMahon and the WWF was getting targeted by the Parents Television Council, a conservative Christian values advocacy group founded and led by L. Brent Bozell III. And here's a fun fact. The honorary chairman of the PTC at the time was former wrestling commentator and WrestleMania special guest Steve Allen. Now, people are thinking, well, he's obviously more famous for chat shows and being a comedian. He was actually, in I think the late 50s maybe, a wrestling commentator back in the day. There's actually video on YouTube of him talking about it as well. So, the PTC, they had issues with the WWF programming, along with various shows like all Seth MacFarlane's animated shows and South Park and Friends, and Two and a Half Men and Ally McBeal and Dawson's Creek and Grey's Anatomy and the OC, and that 70s show, which I personally had a problem with because it wasn't funny. They pressured the FCC to levy fines and hoped to have advertisers boycott shows the PTC deemed irresponsible, overtly offensive, sexually explicit, or blasphemous. In the WWF's case, it actually partially worked. So when WWF SmackDown became a regular show on broadcast network UPN, the PTC took an added interest. When it was on cable only, they weren't too bothered. And then they basically sprung into action like from August 1999 onwards, when SmackDown became a regular show. The PTC claimed they had cost the WWF 30 to 40 advertisers thanks to their campaigning, which is a claim that is not true. The WWF in turn quickly started to scale back on some of the swearing and some of the raunchy aspects of the television presentation within months of SmackDown's inception. We'll talk about right to censor in a minute, but in late 1999 to early 2000, I know that, as you said, you were on Jacked, you were on Heat, exclusively in 2000 up to June. Did you notice, or were there any edicts passed by Vince or any of the Office people to not do certain things, not swear as much, not gesticulate in certain manners, that kind of thing?
No, because I wasn't in that orbit of getting promos and getting things to say or getting angles that needed to be produced. My whole thing was just matches, finish. That was about it. And not even with the agents micromanagement. This is before they even wrote stuff down. They walked through. They had the IFPs on the referee to communicate moves to the wrestlers. I mean, they have IFPs for, hey, you need to go home now, or we need an extra 2 minutes. But I wasn't privy to any of this stuff. This is probably mostly production meeting stuff or inner circle meetings. And then obviously the top guys or anybody with promos are going to get, they probably were kind of shocked that they were given these like barriers, boundaries, guardrails they need to stay within. But there's a few different reasons, and we'll get to it, why the right to censor was formed, besides a defensive mechanism or even just a big middle finger F you to the Parent Television Council. But there was a good motivation to have the right to censor there. And we can get to that after we talk about the formation of what they told me it was on the first piece of commentary I ever did, I think it was on SmackDown, they kept telling me to call it the right to censorship. And I was like, that something in my mind, even though I wasn't really knowing why, it's just too many syllables. It doesn't roll off the tongue. And I was like, and I remember mentioning it to, might have been Michael Call. I said, hey man, do you think they want to like shorten that or just call it the RTC? And he was like, Vince just said, just say it. But when they aired it, they kept like silencing after I said right to censor. Ship was completely muted out, almost to the point where it's a little jarring because the crowd noise is different or it's not there. Go back and watch it because it is on YouTube.
So just before we get to, the inception of the group, did you notice any picketing by PTC members? Were you reading any in the newspapers that they were targeting the WWF? Did you have any knowledge at all that the PTC were going after Vince?
They probably did bring it up in talent meetings at one point towards the end when they started to clue everybody in that was getting a lot of promo time, and then they figured we might as well have a talent meeting. I believe there was one talent meeting and saying we need to kind of go in a different direction. This might have been, for all I know, May of 2000, and then June is when they did that, or it could have been that day. I know that there was something not too long before they cut my hair and they brought me out as Stevie Richards, before it was even the right to censor at all. There was at least one thing, but I think a lot of it was delegating down to the writers, the agents, and everybody to where when the finished or the finished creative product gets in the hands of the talent, they're like, oh, no cursing, no this, or even a list. I mean, I think there started to be a list sometimes on the board and on the papers by the production office where it was like, no swearing, no this now. Although, if you're not swearing, Austin swearing or other people within their gimmick, it must have been tough for Steve or Rocky. I don't think they would have budged too much, but imagine if Steve Austin wasn't allowed to give the middle fingers or say the word ass. And then Rocky was in full like pie mode and all this stuff in his promos. Imagine if those got watered down. Those guys might have hurt their career at the time a little bit.
This is something I want to bring up to you, and you and Blue Meanie, your careers are, I'm going to try and say this word, intrinsically, somewhere like that, linked together. But the thing is, Blue Meanie is let go after a year, and I've spoken to Meanie about this, and it's a fine theory, and I think it's probably true, is that he was a Vince Russo hire like you, essentially. So they never they did the Blue Dust thing, but he'd already done that in ECW. Blue Meanie and you basically took your ECW characters and brought it to the WWF, and Vince McMahon or The Machine hadn't created you or hadn't molded you into their image. And I sort of figured that if they hadn't come up with Right to Censor for you to really change your character into a WWF creation, you could have ended up like Meanie. Essentially, you would have just been seen as another ECW guy coming over, and then you had your run and then you go again. So, this really, in my opinion, I don't know about yours, extended your career greatly with the WWF, this change of direction.
Yeah, I believe it did. I don't really fight that theory too much. As a matter of fact, the whole thing in the beginning, I believe, was just a rib on Parent Television Council, of course. I don't think it was made for, even though we could have gotten more time out of it, and we'll talk about that probably in the second part of the series with the downfall, but I really believe that this was only going to be a 3 to 4 week thing, a rib on that, just a passing gimmick, and maybe even a rib on me to see if I would cut my hair and just let me go after that. It could have been like a final insult on the way out. I think the advantage I had, and I'm not speaking out of turn with this, it's just a realistic thing. They could have also released Meanie because he was overweight. His work wasn't, much like I'll talk about when I gained all the weight, my work suffered when I was with Right to Censor and gained all the way up to 262 and had to carry potentially 62 pounds more than I was used to. Meanie's work never evolved. He never recreated himself. He never did anything to give them a different look to say, oh, Blue Meanie, we can change him and repackage him into this. Now, Meanie did lose a ton of weight after that in 3PW, I believe, and he was the Blue Boy, and he was super, lean and thin, But the funny part, weird part about wrestling and wrestling fans is like that's not the Blue Meanie people love. The Blue Meanie people loved is the guy that was severely overweight, yet could move and moonsault and do stuff like that. And for me, I think WWE released him way too early too, because just seeing a big guy like that go up and deliver the moonsault is a feature. To see Meanie do anything remarkably athletic or agile for a guy his size, just one spot. You could have drew money with that. And of course, Meanie is incredibly entertaining, and we talked about it before, you can't have anybody, or everybody, I should say, always mad, always pissed off, always wanting to fight. You need to have some kind of fun and comic relief on the show. So they didn't get the most out of the investment Meanie. And then later on, obviously we're talking about it well after the fact where these two guys are good friends. Do you think the whole thing with him and Bradshaw kind of like this at each other, maybe unspoken or maybe tension, or maybe Bradshaw messed with him and didn't respect him? I don't know. That's pure speculation, but maybe it all adds up to Meanie getting released, where I didn't have any of that. I was just working matches, proving I wasn't in the best shape I could be, but I could bump, I could move, I could work babyface and heel in these enhancement matches on the secondary shows. I could come up and have a little bit of range with the parody, which, by the way, if Meanie was with me and we were the New Brood or the Brood WO or whatever, parody, it would have only made the gimmick even better. So by doing that, they only got half of the impact that I was doing with the imitation gimmick. So you can always, no matter what anybody, like if you have, I know I'm talking ad nauseum, but Meanie deserves for people to still appreciate him for the talent that he was and still is, because he can go out there and entertain and do his thing. I think it was in the MLW Battle Riot a couple of years ago and got like the biggest pop in the Battle Royal at the ECW Arena with a BWO music hit. They were excited to see Meanie. There's still intrinsic value, I'll use your word, intrinsic value in a talent right up to the point where they literally can't get to the ring. And Meanie's one of those guys.
I think, yeah, when I interviewed Meanie, I got the impression that he just sort of thought that The Office saw him as a Vince Russo holdover. And then because, they never reinvented him, maybe it's just one of those things where they just decided creative has nothing for you, and then he ends up going back to ECW in that sense. Would you have continued doing the impersonations of other wrestlers at the time if it was up to you? Did you see like more value in that? We'll talk about that more in a future episode, I'm sure, but did you want to do something different?
No, I don't think so. Even in retrospect, 2020 is hindsight and all that stuff. You can say it very easily, but even at the time, I was aware enough to know, first of all, I was a Vince Russo hire and Vince Russo was gone. So I was smart enough politically to know that my biggest advocate for getting me here is gone like a week after I got there. And that might have been why I kind of languished in those secondary shows for a while, because Russo probably would have ridden me into that. Once again, Meanie and I trying to kill a dog at SummerSlam with jumper cables. That might not have been the path I wanted to go in my career, but is what I had. I believe, just like the Dr. Stevie gimmick, and we're going to get to the Dr. Stevie era in a special, probably 2-part series there, but I knew something needed to change. And as far as my ego with cutting my hair, of course I didn't want to cut my hair. It was too comfortable, kind of like I am now, but the opportunity to do something, and I knew I was getting tested. I just didn't know if it was going to be a 3 or 4 week run or if I was going to make the most out of it. And thank God I had a writer that was absolutely completely in my corner to where we could write the promos to shift, and we'll get to it, shift from a parody, a continuation of an imitation parody gimmick of the Parent Television Council to a full-blown cult following within the group.
So do you see the well, we're going to go further back in the making of Right to Censor, but do you see the Right to Censor in the first time you came out there with the shirt and the Mormon outfit, pretty much? Did you see that as a continuation of the parody character you were doing?
No, I just saw it as might be short-lived. I never done a parody character as a truly hated heel. It was always just kind of with Raven, I was a lovable heel, being the clueless putz. People were kind of entertained by it. This was the first time where the music, the presentation, everything that people could like or think was cool or could attach to and appreciate was removed. And it needed to be. Now people in 2024 are like, you guys won with the PG era, and they can appreciate how much they hated me at the time. But no, at that time, there was people, it was legitimate, kind of like felt like old school Memphis heat. Because you're taking in their mind, and we're going to talk about the backstage reasons why I kind of like educatedly guess why they needed to change everything, using the right to censor as that vehicle, as the instigator to change the style of the TV product. But this was legitimately people saying, we paid a ticket, we bought a pay-per-view, and you're trying to ruin our good time and not give us our money's worth. They effing hated me.
With the Right to Censor group, tell us about the meet. I imagine you're sat down, someone, I don't know if it's Vince or Bruce Pritchard or somebody else, explains to you what they want to do with you. And obviously this is going to go into the haircutting story as well, because you've alluded to it about 3 times already. I know you want to tell the whole story with it. So talk about the first time you heard about the concept of a Right to Censor group. It may not have even been a group, it might have just been you. But tell us about the first time you heard of Right to Censor, who told you about it, and what concepts had already been fleshed out when it was presented to you.
It was brought up to me as a cold pitch. Basically, you're going to do it. It was brought up as a cold pitch from Vince McMahon himself. I got called into Vince's office, which right there, you're a new guy, you're nervous, you're trying to impress everybody. You don't want to get heat with anybody. You don't want the boss to kind of know you're there until you get more comfortable with the way things work, which, by the way, after 10 years in the company, I still wasn't comfortable and knew the way things worked. So that was a exercise in futility. But he called me in his office and he said, have a seat. And I'm just like, oh my God. And we're alone in the office. And he's talking and he goes, I'm paraphrasing. And, Janelle Graham was there, by the way. She wasn't even born, I don't think. So he said, we have this idea. And basically he gave me kind of like the Cliff Notes version of the Parent Television Council and what you're going to be. Encouraged me to join the Parent Television Council, which I did, to get all the literature, marketing materials, all that stuff. And he didn't give a big pitch like you're going to be the biggest heel in the company or we're going to have a group. And there was nothing like that. And he did say, we need you to cut your hair. He said something to the effect, do you mind doing that? Or would you mind doing that? Or can you, is there a problem? He was trying to I was like, no, absolutely not. I said, how short do you want me to cut it? Because I was trying to get away with like maybe some hair or whatever. He goes, no, you're going to basically almost full buzz cut, or you're going into a haircut like somebody who joined the PTC. And I remember getting my hair cut, and he actually came by and made sure the hair was cut short enough and everything. Made 2-3 minute thing, like not a big deal. And that was it. I took notes. I was always told, try to take notes when Vince was talking and show you're paying attention or whatever. So I took a couple notes, but I could instantly, the wrestlers are naturally paranoid. I didn't know if you knew that, James. So my paranoia was, is this a rib? Are they just doing it? Are they going to get rid of me? They released Meanie. So it was kind of in the back of my head. Are they looking to get rid of ECW guys? Are they looking to do this or that? So when that happened, I really thought it was the beginning of the end. And then he told me what they wanted me to wear, which I think was presented more like a Jehovah's Witness type outfit, which that's what they wear. Black pants. I think I even saw one time, like initially the outfit, we can get in the outfit in itself, but Jim Ross used to call me Old White Socks. And people had wondered, like, oh, that was so genius. You wore the white socks and it just stood out. And it was so, by the way, I went to Catholic school and we always wore, for some reason, white socks. I never liked wearing the thin black ones. But in this case, they wanted me to wrestle in those shoes. I was wrestling in like legitimate shoes for a little bit. and the dress socks would just cut my heel up as I was running. So I would wear the white socks instead. And then it just caught on. They thought I had Vince, like every time he could throw, let me steal his socks. And I'd pull up and he'd laugh. He thought it was great. By the way, when you think you're over with Vince, don't get too arrogant, don't get too cocky, and don't take it for granted. Because the dude will wake up the next day and think those white socks are the stupidest thing ever.
Did you get like a creative services thing? I don't even know if creative services was too much of a thing in 2000, but in the 90s and 80s, you'd get presented with like, a big white piece of card with, an artist rendering. Did you get anything like that as part of a presentation?
I wasn't in that famous department that has the the materials for the no, we went to whatever Kmart or something and I got it. And somehow, like to this day, when I want to do like for this episode, I was looking for the outfit to wear it for the episode. I might try it for part 2, but you cannot find short sleeve white dress shirts anymore. I have to cut them and then sew them. But back then I was like, well, the short sleeve ones are like $5 or $6 cheaper than the long sleeve, and it's going to be easier for me to move around. And I know you got questions about wrestling in an outfit, not fun, but yeah, it was literally just like the Daisy Dukes in a half shirt. Okay, let me go buy a pair of jeans, throw it through the dryer 4 times, and let's go to the buy or die box at Hot Topic and look for the out of date bands. It's a perfect, frugal wrestler's gimmick method.
I'm trying to think. So you've already said it was just miserable experience, wrestling and the stuff. We'll talk about the weight and stuff in a minute, but you said something interesting before you actually joined the Parents Television Council. What did you learn from their lingo that you actually incorporated in your promos?
Well, I'm trying to think exactly what it was. There was formulations of certain phrases like, fight the good fight, I think was like pretty close to what they were doing. It's for your own good is a very condescending thing that Jacob Israel, the writer, that's the writer who I worked with that was there. We were responsible for pretty much all the promos. I defer to Jacob because, I wouldn't have an idea. He would give it to me and then I could kind of dress it up in my own personality. But fight the good fight. It's for your own good. I think scantily clad women was in the PTC website. Sexuality, those kinds of one-word terms, I think were in their pitch letter to try to get advertisers to not give money to WWE. I'm trying to think what else it could be. It was just expanded from that. Like basically when you plead with the fans, like I'm just trying to help you and you people are not listening to me, and the look into my eyes thing was me. Because there was I forget what it was, because I studied a lot of serial killers, which I had to do again for Dr. Stevie. That was basically American Psycho. But I did look at Manson, Jim Jones, a bunch of other people, and I could swear either it was that or one of those phony preachers that said, look into my eyes. And I said, that's perfect. Because anytime I was beating somebody up or when I was choking, saying China in the corner, looking in my eyes, I'm trying to help you. I'm doing it for your own good. Those were the money spots in the ring that I could get real heat without doing a ton of moves.
With the promos, again, just before we talk about what you actually said, I mean, we more or less did, but considering you never really cut promos in the WWF, you must have had like an advocate somewhere in the WWF to tell Vince to say, this dude's a really good talker. Because anyone who watched ECW, especially in the early, especially from 94 to 97, people don't realize, and I'll say this for when we eventually start talking about ECW, is people don't realize what a massive part of the show you were. I think that sort of gets, when people say, oh, the ECW stars are like a Tommy Dreamer or a Sandman or something. Dude, you were as big a part of that as anybody else, and I think that's something that may be forgotten a bit, but people should go and watch those ECW shows, and you cut a lot of interviews, and especially with the BWO in 97, when you're starting to be taken more seriously as a potential main eventer and potential heavyweight champion, you start cutting very serious sit-down promos where you're staring into the camera. Who knew that you could do that, and who told Vince that you could be trusted to carry this responsibility on TV?
I don't quite know. It could have been Jacob Israel, the writer, that said, I watched this stuff. It could have been Vince remembering Vince Russo's pitch to get me hired, from ECW. It could have been that one time the BWO was at the Buchanan Center for the Raw when we invaded WWE, and I cut that promo on Jerry Lawler. It could have stuck out to him, and then years later he remembered, oh, yeah, that's right. Or it could have been, if you want to look at wrestling paranoia once again, it could have been, let's give this guy enough rope to hang himself so we can release him for doing terrible promos 4 weeks later. Like basically he can be the placeholder. Then when we get Godfather, Val Venis, and whoever, Bull Buchanan, we have people, Val can cut a promo. He already knew that. So maybe those people were put in line to replace me if I wasn't up to snuff as far as, being a leader of the group. It's amazing with ECW. It's very amazing because it's funny because I've always had that spot where I'm kind of half under the radar, but you kind of notice if you pay attention. ECW is a perfect example of that because everybody uses their Mount Rushmore of ECW or most influential or the top 10 talents in ECW. My name, and I think it's a compliment because they don't know, but when they see it, they're like reminded of it as if it's brand new. I think it's a cool thing. I don't take personal offense to that. I take great pride that I was hopefully someone that contributed to that term success of ECW when it was in business. But there were definitely more people that were very much more featured, and I get that. I was basically a utility guy, much like WWE. I think I've proven over my whole wrestling career that I can adapt to anything you give me, and I don't need to be handheld to get over again. I could get myself over as long as you give me the time the week after all this stuff goes down. But thank you. I really take a lot of pride, and I feel extremely blessed that I can contribute to ECW as much as I could.
Yeah, I very much advise people, who want to see what Stevie Richards.
It's my old voice too. It's my old voice. You won't recognize my voice.
Old voice.
It's like because I was doing a lot of different stuff to get video footage of you for ECW for various different reasons, including an intro that never worked out. And I forgot that you're the one who introduced us Raven, and of course the BWO stuff and everything.
And Beulah, and Vampire Warrior, and managed the Pitbulls, and got chokeslammed 10 times a night by 911. Even I was like, wow, they're starting to push me. There's no way they'll have 911 kill me every night. No, one more time. Well, oh my God. One time they chanted 10 more times, and he did it 10 more times.
Couldn't you just negotiate with the crowd and say, couldn't you just 4 or 5, that'll do? But no, it's got to be 10.
Well, this coincides with what I talked about with the bolts and the nuts and the bumps in the ECW ring. Imagine getting chokeslammed for real by 911 in that ring.
With Vince, do you remember any early critique of Vince McMahon on your presentation or promos? After you've been doing it for a few weeks, you run out there and you tell people it's for your own good and you're covering up Terry Runnels and that kind of thing. Do you remember any early criticism or praise?
The thing I really had to get down in the beginning, and there's a promo with Godfather where I took a lot of time with my promo. I had to get the cadence down for TV without rushing the promo. Vince didn't necessarily say anything outside of, hand signals from Gorilla. He would do this sometimes, or he would be like, you got to condense it down. And the good part was that was one of the times like John came up to me, Bradshaw, and he was messing with me, and he said, geez, Stevie, I go, we have 2 hours. Maybe I can, he said something like, maybe there's time for me to do my match tonight. I was like, John, I'm so sorry. Now, because I was like, I didn't realize. He goes, I'm just kidding. It was a really good promo, but you definitely have to, we're on TV. You have to have tight time. I had a little bit of experience. We're working what we called hard time. They basically use 6 minutes. It's 6 minutes, but I didn't have enough experience. And that was a big adjustment, trying to get myself over, talking a very, not a monotone, but the pacing is almost off-putting, but not be so off-putting that I take an extra 3 minutes of the segment doing it.
How much of an outline were you given for promos? So you said Jacob Israel, he was a writer, he worked with you the entire run. So how much of an outline was it, or did you both sit down and work on scripts together, or did you work on bullet points and you just figure it out? I mean, they seemed fairly tightly scripted, those interviews.
No, they weren't. There was scripting of bullet points, but it wasn't fully scripted. It was my pacing. I had enough time to think between each thing, and there are certain times where I would get flustered because I had heat that kind of took me back as being the first time of being this type of heel. But my thing, and here's another advice for a young wrestler: if you're a heel, especially if you're a babyface, this doesn't work, and you get flustered, you point out or you repeat the exact same line with I used to say, like I did a promo of Raven on Sunday Night Heat, where I was like going to call him out, and they were booing me or they were saying what? So for some reason, I was saying something, they were saying what, and then I said, there's a man, and I didn't stumble, but in my mind, you know what I mean? I stumbled, and they kind of did the what, and I went, there is a man. And they started booing. They stopped the what. I was like, oh, okay. I wish I knew that during Right to Censor, because that was years down the line. But that was and we're going to do an episode on botches and how they can get covered up without people knowing that. But there was not a full word for word script. It was literally bullet point, point towards the people you're working against, and then hit your lines about fight the good fight. It's for your own good. Jacob and I sat down with it, but it was very loose. And he said, just go out there. As long as you hit these 3 points, you got 4 or 5 minutes, and that's it. And then sometimes I would pass the mic to other people because I had a group, and I would really advocate for everybody talking, because hearing me the whole time, in the beginning, obviously I had to foster that Stockholm syndrome, that they're with me, but they're not saying anything. Then they got with talking. But with that, I was just trying to be political and not get further heat with the group, with the people did not want to be in the group. So that's an uphill battle I had to fight from beginning to end.
What did Vince or whoever tell you in regards to where the storyline was going? Because you've alluded to the fact that he said, hey, it could have been 3 or 4 weeks. I mean, were you given a pitch beyond where you're going to cover up Terry and you're going to cover up the hose and you're going to take Steve Blackman's screamer sticks from him and that kind of thing? We ever pitched anything, we ever told you going to be doing anything beyond that it was going to grow into a group?
No, nothing like that. And the Steve Blackman thing was actually much later down the line. It was towards the, over the hill version of the Right to Censor, towards the downfall, because there was a long time where there was an edict put down that nobody could touch me for like 6 months. And, it grew. That's the most important part of why I had so much heat. Nobody could get to me. By the time the Steve Blackman thing happened, which was a lot of fun, it's on YouTube, it's entertaining. And he gives me the sticks, and then he has a spare pair. And Steve's personality in that segment was awesome, with the smile and the promo at the end. He goes, I just did this for all our own good. So, but nobody touched me for a long time, and that really did play into that. As far as a long-term thing, just like anything else in my career, it was always week to week. I was like, it's got to end this week. And it was teetering. And like I said, we'll cover it in the full episode in detail. When Jacob Israel left WWF at the time, it was the beginning. It was already the beginning of the end anyway. He was my biggest advocate that kept it. The talents have writers that really, really pitched for them, agents that really, really pitched for them. He's the only one I'm fully aware that would pitch for me. I didn't think anybody else. I don't think people put up barriers to keep me from being featured or being on TV or doing anything, but not saying yes is almost saying no at the same time. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I'll give you another example. You stole the Dudley Boys tables then, but we'll talk about the Dudleys soon enough. Now, before we get off of the sort of inception of Right to Censor and we start talking about the members coming in, that damn entrance music.
It's awesome.
It does its job. I'll give you that. Did they just turn up to you one day and say, or did you get to pick which siren that you wanted to use? Or
I didn't get to pick anything with this. I had a spot. That's all that mattered. And for me, I thought it was great because it was so much the antithesis of entrance music. Like I said, there could be nothing cool, identifiable, people that want to latch on to anything, appreciate it. We couldn't have anything. So the music, even the Tron of just the flashing symbol, it was it was so low budget, so low grade, and so nothing that it pissed people off. And what was I gonna say? Dude, I was laughing. Somebody might have been joking with me. They're like, your music's gonna be like in one of the WWE volumes or WWF volume musics. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get a royalty check. I didn't, can you imagine people like playing that in the gym or like on their car as they drive by? Probably as a goof, they would do it.
I was going to say, imagine you getting a royalty check for it.
Oh man, that would piss the boys off too, not just the fans. Hey, by the way, it got to the point, weirdly enough, that where, speaking of a goof or a novelty or a lark, there was groups of people dressed as us in the crowd after the first few months. And they told me stories after the fact or emailed me when I started the fitness channel that people would try to beat them up in the crowd because they were all dressed the same as the Right to Censor.
It's a good question, with the theme music. I mean, it's not a good thing, people getting beaten up for wearing a shirt, but it's a good thing with the theme music or sort of like the anti-theme music. What if they had just picked something? Because, like in the early 2000s, theme music was getting really generic and like really everything had the exact same sort of guitar sound to it. If they'd have put that on you, man, that would have, I'm not saying it would have killed the group, but I mean, that awful siren music made such a difference.
I think it did. I mean, it's the whole presentation. We talked about WWE. They do the best presentation. They have the total package. No matter if you're figured in or not, even at the lowest rung of the ladder, you're at least going to be presented as a star. It's much like I said with the NFL. If you're playing for an NFL team, even if they're in last place, you are a professional football player, therefore under the umbrella of the NFL, and you need to represent the shield. So in this way, we need to represent the quality of WWF or WWE, even though the music might not be considered to be quality.
It's catchy, if nothing else. Right, we're going to talk about the members of Right to Censor now, and the first chap to join Right to Censor ends up being Bull Buchanan. So, I was for wrestling bios, by the way, I'll shout out them. I've spoken to that guy a few times. He's always very nice, and he did a very, very good sort of Right to Censor, like potted history from beginning to end. So I'm very grateful for him for making that as well. He says, well, he shows that basically the first thing that happens is you start chastising the Godfather on promos, as far as, the first build up to a feud kind of thing. And then, he's wrestling Bull Buchanan, and then I think he beats Bull Buchanan. But then a week later, you somehow hoodwink Bull Buchanan into your way of thinking, into the cult of the opposite of personality, I guess, in that sense. Bull Buchanan as the first man in. When did you find out you were going to get more people involved with the group? What did you think of Bull Buchanan as a choice?
Usually that day. And Bull is a choice. Bull is a friend, as a man, is just one of the night. He reminds me of Glenn, of Kane, with just a big guy that's very nice, can work, can move. Bull's a guy who should have actually been risen up after Right to Censor. I know he did a thing with Cena, right? The B2 gimmick after that in SmackDown. But you had a lot of money written on Bull Buchanan, in my opinion. That was Vince's walking through the airport, larger than life. He was saddled with a lot of gimmicks that did not live up to his potential. I think Right to Censor did it to an extent because he could wrestle and also have a personality, and he looked like the big bug-eyed type of bald guy looked like somebody that belonged in a cult. But definitely his gimmicks were the Truth Commission. Then he teamed up with Boss Man at WrestleMania 2000, and then the Right to Censor, and then the B2, and then he got released. They did not get the most out of a guy like Bull Buchanan, who, by the way, now his son's wrestling, and he's teaming with his son on the Indies. So there could be another Buchanan in WWE someday. So I think he fit in great. I think he fit in great because he had a great attitude. He just wanted to work and he wanted to be booked and he wanted to make the most out of that. And for him, it was just a different type of heel. And he could kind of get a little more comfortable in it for a time because he didn't do any of the talking, then maybe a little bit here and there. And he can kind of just do his thing and be a cog in the wheel of the RTC.
For people who don't know, Barry Buchanan, was in WWF's various different development leagues for years, and as you rightly pointed out, he be in development. He was always someone like Glenn Culker or someone like that, a name that was always bandied about like the newsletters, and at least in Bull's case, he did make it to the the big show, to the WWF, but he'd turn up for a short while, go away again, repackage, turn up again, disappear again. And it was very, very stop-start for him. I don't know if this would be a fair comment to say, but was it just a personality or promo ability that he was lacking to sort of get him noticed more?
I honestly couldn't tell you because I think the most important thing, not only from the office liking you, but the locker room. And the locker room loved him, all the top guys, and he was real tight with just about anybody, or at least friendly. And he figured in because he's a big dude. He's muscular. He can work. I don't get it. And, he had a very heavy Southern drawl and stuff. Maybe Vince didn't like that for promos, but in the right to censor. That's why, there was a few times where I pushed Bull to talk because he sounds like a revival preacher. If he really turned up the accent, I just wanted to see him shine because I was aware of his career, the stop-start stuff, and I'm very familiar with stop-start stuff as well. So it's a shame. They think that he's one of those guys that were one of the most underrated talents that I've ever seen in wrestling.
He was in ECW. I had no idea. He teamed with Billy Black as the Dark Riders. They made 2 appearances in ECW in March 1996. Apparently they wrestled the Eliminators on which aired on one of ECW's weekly TV shows. So there you go. A little thing that neither of us knew there. He was also in Smokey, USWA. He was just here, there, and everywhere for years.
He was like one of the last true territorial journeymen. One of the last of that era.
He did a lot of stuff in Japan for years afterwards as well, so I didn't know that either. So, next person to join. Here's the one that really, because as a fan, I'm 13 years old. I love The Godfather because of everything he brought. And what I'm saying is, he brought all the women, he brought the fun, he brought the party to every single show. He had a great spot on the card. He loved being The Godfather because it matched his personality. You might disagree with his personality slightly, but at times. But anyway, The Godfather gets drafted in. So we believe that it's a very clever mechanism to get the most raunchy characters off TV while they basically protest about it at the same time. It's a very, very clever way that right to censor was used by the WWF. And obviously Val Venis at the same time. He'd already given up the
adult film star character.
But he was known for it no matter what. He needed another gimmick to erase that even further. People still think of him that way, so we needed to switch both of them up.
Well, he's another one with like.
Well, I say we. I had nothing to do with it. By the way, that's part of the one you're probably going to get into. I had nothing to do with this. I didn't even know if I was going to be there much longer.
Well, with Val, he becomes, Val, and then we'll talk about Val in a minute anyway. But with Godfather, he makes it known he's not happy about, in real life, joining the right to censor. He becomes the Goodfather. And with Chris Van Vliet, he makes mention of the fact that basically I was not nice to Stevie. I was unhappy with my spot. I was unhappy with the creative direction. And elsewhere, he also says that he was preparing to quit over this. He told The Undertaker that he was preparing to quit. And apparently, in another interview, he said that he and Bull Buchanan were made tag team champions in an effort to keep him with the company longer. That's how strongly he felt, and that's how much he was not enjoying the role. So, The Godfather, I suppose, thoughts about The Godfather before he joins Right to Censor, and then issues dealing with him when he's forced to join the group.
First of all, unique personalities are needed in professional wrestling, whether you care to mesh or jive with the personality, which I had no problems with him as the Godfather before that. Of course, I wasn't in the right to censor, and then all the other stuff didn't happen. Now, I'm going to take a completely different perspective on this. Obviously, I was made well aware by actions, looks, words, inflection, every hint in the book without actually saying, I do not want to be part of this group. I do not want to be a part of anything you have to do. It was seemingly at the time, it was a very personal type of thing. And I think in that interview with Chris Van Vliet, that's what he said. He took it out on me. I had nothing to do with it. I didn't invent the right to censor, and it was on Vince. He said in the interview he had to blame somebody, and it was me. Now, I'm going to take this perspective from a purely business standpoint. Imagine if you're one of the biggest baby faces in the company. Would people have argued with me? No, he wasn't. Yes, he was. A perennial baby face with the same exact spot on the card, with almost the same predictable thing that people would never get tired of seeing week in and week out. That's one of the most over baby face. He didn't need to evolve. Just every he mentioned the town, might mention the local strip club, brought out the local girls from that strip club, and that's it. Formula for success. Now, from a business standpoint, and here's what I talked about before, as a baby face, you have an entire multiple stream of income potential, not just from getting booked, which obviously if you're over as a babyface, you're getting booked on TVs, house shows, live events, and pay-per-views. You're getting booked. You're automatically making more money when you're figured in to a spot. By the way, he doesn't even have to wrestle. So on a TV spot or a pay-per-view or even a house show, it doesn't eat up a ton of time on your show. And you can do it each and every week. And people will look forward to it. And once again, just like with Meanie, you need to have some fun. And I'm sorry I took that fun away from you, James. You need to have some fun and have some comic relief and just not take it so seriously, at least for a few minutes. Now, on the side of the business standpoint, where outside of the bookings, outside of being featured, because he was featured as a heel, he was the most, if I dare say, Val was one thing. Godfather being turned into the Goodfather made the right to censor what it was. If I didn't convert him, quote, because I didn't do it, don't blame me. If he wasn't converted, it would not have the power nor the impact on the WWE or WWF at the time if he didn't. We would just be shouting. We'd be an angry old man shouting at the clouds. But turning the most over sexualized babyface, let's call it, into a Bible-thumping Jehovah's Witness or Mormon is what made it. So he was the most important part of the right to censor, in my opinion. But getting back to the business standpoint and the money that the right to censor probably cost this guy, merchandise. He was in some video games, but you didn't know that was going to happen. Action figures, T-shirts, whatever Ho Train stuff they sold, he had to be in the top 5 merch sellers. So it pained the company, I bet, too, to take a loss that way, to take one of their most popular baby faces and remove all the merchandise and remove all the extra money that the company and Godfather would make. So you have a mortgage, you have a car payment, you have bills to pay. I don't know if he has kids. I knew he might have been married. I'm not familiar with his personal life, but he has financial responsibilities that now your pay is potentially cut, maybe on a good month or a good year, cut in half. Who are you going to take it out on? Can't take it out on Vince McMahon. So I think he was just projecting his anger, frustration, the financial hit he took. And he was basically paired up, or we were joined at the hip for the whole right to censor stuff until the end. So I'm right there. I'm right next to him here. What are you going to do? So I understand. Was it a fun time? No. Life was miserable. Life sucked. The job sucked. Being in the locker room sucked because it wasn't just him. The people that were connected to him and really good friends were also making passing remarks and stuff. You know how wrestling is. It's a high school cafeteria. So That's fine. I understand. And in my mind, and did it hurt? Of course it did. It immensely hurt me. Who wants to be disliked at the time? I'm sure I gave reasons here and there throughout my career, but who wants to be disliked for something that is no fault of your own? And there was nothing at the time, even if I was absolutely aware of it, or he told me, I don't want to be here and it's your fault, I'm losing money, or he never said any of those things. It was a very quiet heat, but I knew it. And what could I have said to him to make it better? Nothing. So it probably was the I don't know, the less stressful part. It was just the quiet heat throughout the entire year.
It was, we'll go back to the creative in a second. It was hard for me as a fan to sort of accept that. There was such a dissonance between what he was and what he became within the space of like probably 3 days, probably between like Raw and SmackDown. I always wonder that, and obviously we're just rebooking the past that can't happen, but I always wonder what if like you were the antagonist and he was the protagonist throughout this kind of thing? Because it would have elevated Godfather at the same time. I don't know, but I mean, you're of the opinion that no, Godfather joining made the right censor more important.
Well, we did dip in and out where, like when we put Victoria through the table, I was before Victoria and Stevie on Stevie Night Heat. So it's funny how a small world, but he was hesitating and then he would say, let me do it. But then there was parts like in that Wrestling Bios documentary. By the way, that guy, his editing skills, please teach me your editing skills. When we, when we closed the APA office down, and Godfather was tempted to smoke the cigar. I love that. Why is it always like, it's literally, you can see now there's a bit of Stockholm Syndrome. There's brainwashing involved. There's that cult. I wanted that. I wanted Val to be like walking by a magazine stand and we see like an adult magazine and he kind of gravitates toward. I wanted all that. That's always good to mix it up and show if we cheer even more from him, he's going to turn back into the Godfather. That was but they wanted that to be very, very few and far between. They were pretty stringent on, once again, PTC. If you show any inkling of the character consistently, they're probably going to protest once again because they know you're bringing them back. So they had to be very careful.
Speaking of coming back, The Godfather, and actually Val Venis at the same event, and we'll talk about Val, as I say, shortly. Royal Rumble 2002, which for me is a dark pay-per-view because it was the very first one that actually was a pay-per-view in this country. And then they started bringing in the pay, because they were all free. They were on Sky Sports, premium subscription thing, but they were all free for us. And then they started bringing the Royal Rumble and very slowly over the next few years making them all pay-per-views. He's brought back, and then he's gone legit in 2002, quote unquote. He's now an escort instead of a pimp. I guess not an escort, but he runs an escort agency. It was never the same, and I always find that quite weird. How just that tiny little just change in character that now he's legit, and it just never had quite the same sting to it. It never like hit quite as hard. But I also think maybe it was 2002, the invasion had happened, and it more or less just killed everyone. A third of the people stopped watching WWF programming across that 6 months as well. So maybe it was just.
Isn't it funny that the final dream of WCW versus WWE is about to happen, and it was like the biggest flop ever in wrestling history?
Awful. I hated it. But anyway, as I say, it's not about me. There's a couple of things about The Godfather that I want to bring up to you, as well as Victoria, I guess, as well. So he talks on the Chris Van Vliet clip about a slap story.
I heard in another interview you said that you took a lot of this out on Stevie Richards.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I did.
But I mean, no fault of his own.
None of his. I haven't seen him since then. But if I ever see him, I'm not a bully. Believe me, I'm not a bully, but I wasn't nice to him. And I took it out on, I was in a bad place. I was in a real bad place, man. And I blamed him.
With the amount of conventions you're doing, signings you're doing, appearances you're doing, your paths are going to cross eventually.
Hey, I'm sure he's heard the story about me. I think he was in the...
We can FaceTime him after if you want. I have his number.
He probably doesn't. He might have just thought I was a dickhead, I don't know. But I'm not normally, but I was mean to him. I remember one time Shane was doing an interview. I think it had to do with Adam Sandler was in it, and Shane was directing it, and Stevie Ray was supposed to smack me. And I told him, I'm like, you smacked me. And, I told him what I was going to do to him if he smacked me. And so he wouldn't slap me. He wouldn't slap me. And Shane kept getting so mad at him, but he never slapped me, man. But it was stuff like that. I took it out on him, and it was not his fault. It was just, I had to blame somebody, so I blamed Stevie.
Well, we did a backstage pre-tape with Adam Sandler with the Little Nicky movie where he played the devil. And we were cutting apart. Adam Sandler, he obviously didn't want to be there. I could tell. I didn't want to be there either. And Godfather, nobody wanted to be there. So it was just really, it's hard to deal with celebrities that aren't figured. Today it's easy because celebrities, they appreciate wrestling, the entertainment and respect. You see what Logan Paul and other people do. But then you got the occasional Jeremy Piven with Summerfest, which is awesome. He didn't want to be there. He's kind of doing whatever, promoting the movie. I'm trying to play my character. I don't know exactly what the provocation was for me to turn to Godfather or Goodfather at that time and give him a slap. It was directed and produced by Shane McMahon. Shane McMahon somehow was the agent for this in some way. I don't know how, but Shane did get, because Godfather pulled me aside, or he just turned his back to them and looked right at me, and he said, don't you hit me, or we're going to fight, or I'm going to hurt you or do whatever. And I'm like, okay, what do I do? I don't want to slap anybody anyway really hard. I don't like that because I've had my ears cupped a lot and had eardrums broken from like slaps that are sloppy. But Charles is a huge dude. Even my whole hand would probably be like right here. So he's a big dude. So I was doing it, and I was trying to say to Shane, which was right. I mean, honestly, I'm like, okay, this guy wants to fight me. I'm being told, Shane's telling me to slap him. He's telling me not to. If I say he doesn't want me to slap him, now I'm stooging him off. If I tell the Godfather, well, Shane told me to slap, now I'm like in the middle. This encapsulates professional wrestling and politics and potential heat that you can't please anyone. You're damned if you do. You're damned if you don't. And you're damned if you do it real lightly. So probably, I guess, 3 takes of doing it. And then Shane got so mad, he just kind of walked away. And it was a take, and that was it. And I remember just kind of walking away. My head was held down. And all I kept saying to myself was like, what have I ever done to this guy? What did I ever do to this guy? I kind of understood it, but you have to understand, looking at it years down the road with a different set of eyes, that's why I gave the answer I did today. But the answers I had back then were nil. Walking around all day, wonder why everybody is so pissed off. And people that have nothing to do with them but might be connected, like, you're the person costing Godfather all this money. And I probably, if I was aware of it, this is the whole thing too, I probably would have said something and got 10 times more heat. Like, I probably would have said to Godfather, why are you mad at me? Vince is the one. I didn't want to cut my hair, which right then, you're mouthing off, you're talking back, you're disrespect. It could be any bunch of different ways where you get, and once I realized too, that early on, as I'm trying to remember it, that I'm like, okay, well, I'm smart enough to know politically that Godfather is tight, and then a crew, whatever their name was at the time, with Undertaker, which means I'm instantly buried. If Godfather is balking at this, and even Val is starting to balk at this, and nobody is giving a counterpoint that this is a good thing to at least keep you here or whatever. I don't know which way they would have convinced them of that outside of giving them the tag title run and giving them more money on house shows, pay-per-views, stuff like that. But I did walk around for many, many years thinking to myself, what did I do wrong? How did I handle this wrong? Why does this guy hate me? Why does this guy hate me? Why are they not trying to do business? Why are they not selling? It was everything. Totally low point in my career. And that, if it's a segue, that kind of like led me to kind of feel sorry for myself and then go into the severe weight gain.
We never actually talked about the weight gain. We'll talk about it in just a second after this. Just reacting once more to the Godfather clip. Does it sort of relax you a bit more? Does it make you happy that obviously, Charles is showing, quite a lot of contrition? He doesn't actually get to the point where he says, I'd love to shake his hand and apologize, but that's basically what he's saying. So when you see that and you sort of realize, oh, well, it wasn't me, it was everything surrounding the character. I mean, how did you take that?
I mean, I didn't walk around in 2022, 23, 24 wondering what the guy, whatever, I saw the interview and it gave perspective and clarity and answered questions. But at the same time, I mean, maybe it's one of those things where, he said all those things, but, didn't want to talk to me or shake my hand or do whatever. And that's fine. He doesn't need to apologize for anything. He had his very valid reasons, just wasn't clued into what those valid reasons were. Or maybe it's just, dude, in the wrestling business, I don't fit in. I'm not one of them. They've told me and showed me every day during my 31 years in the business, I do not belong in it. I do not fit in. I'm different. And that's fine, because being different and not fitting in will hopefully lead to this chapter and beyond of success outside of wrestling. Also, never fitting in always made me want to do more, work harder, keep myself hyper accountable after the weight loss. But I don't have any answers for that. I mean, if I saw the guy at a convention and he came up and we started talking, that would be fine. I'm not going to I don't hold any ill will to him. The only thing was that it became, in my opinion, at one point, which most wrestling is with backstage politics and heat and locker room stuff, just completely counterproductive and unnecessary to a point of whatever. But compared to how some people got hazed and some people got bullied, him leaving me alone and giving me silent heat, it's probably the better part of it. So I give him that. He didn't try to outwardly try to hurt me physically. He didn't outwardly try to do things to me outside the ring. He just stayed away from me and didn't want to have anything to do with me, which is fine.
Now, you alluded to it about a minute ago. You said about the weight gain. Now, what weight were you when you... Oh, in fact, you've told stories not too long ago about maybe someone coming up to you and say, hey, it'd be great if you could just put on a bit of weight,
Yeah, I didn't think that was the 20 pounds I wanted. Yeah, they were like, we really didn't mean that. We really didn't. That's not the right 20. You put it in the wrong spots. We need chest, arms, legs, not back fat and gut and, rolls.
Okay. Yeah, so how heavy or not heavy were you before Right to Censor, and when did you start putting weight on? How did you go about doing it?
I wouldn't say I was necessarily lean, but I hovered between, say, 205 and 215. So I was a little thicker, but not really muscular, and not lean at all. It went from that to 262 pounds and probably even above that, because that was when I got weighed. And I'll tell the story. But, first and foremost, you heard it already. It affected me emotionally, affected mentally, and mixed up with the paranoia of not knowing if this is my last week, every single week. I started to kind of like one quesadilla a week, maybe turn into one quesadilla a day. I did work out. So there was a part of me, and this happened to me afterwards during like my indie run, saying the mid 2010s, where there was a lot of personal strife going on in my life. And I was working out and dieting, but my cortisol levels from stress were through the roof. So I didn't gain up to 262, but I was like skinny fat. In this case, it was diet, going through the motions of working out, being severely depressed because I knew I wasn't liked and I knew I wasn't wanted, but I had no idea why. There were probably maybe a few reasons, but that caused the normal eating and lack of discipline and all that stuff, gained all the weight. And it really hit me hard. We were in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And for some reason, we started to get weighed. And it wasn't because of me. There was some kind of new wellness thing, and they were trying to make sure people were not super unhealthy. I weighed 262. Bull Buchanan, who is a full 4 inches or more taller and bigger than me, weighed 3 pounds less. I think Godfather and I weighed about the same. Val and I Val, I think I might have outweighed by 10 pounds. Ivory came up to me, and this is like one of the worst, best moments of my life. She looked and saw the weight, and she goes, "My God, you're getting fat. Why don't you lose some weight?" Now, initially, it stung really bad. It stung enough to look at the weight and say, "Oh my God." You know how it is. 5 becomes 10, 10 becomes 15, 15 becomes 25, and you're overweight if you don't get control of it. So I walked away, hung my head down, and for some reason that night in the hotel room, I became sick and tired of being sick and tired. Okay, this is the hand I'm dealt. These people hate me. I'm not wanted. I'm probably going to be released. As a matter of fact, Jim Ross had even pulled me aside, or I went into his office one time when I was in Connecticut, and he said something to the effect of, and I think this was towards the end. I might be wrong on the timing, but this is probably towards the end of Right to Censor, and I went to developmental not long after that. And he said, "You're overweight. Your work is suffering. You're not doing well. You don't look good on TV. You're going to be sent to developmental, and we still might release you, but go back down. You can go down there and prove yourself again," something to that effect. So my work did suffer, not only from the outfit, but from the weight. So, and maybe putting a shirt and tie on, in my mind, I could think I could cover up that extra weight. But the minute it came time to bump, to run, to do all these things mixed with the outfit, I looked like I didn't know how to work. I had Hot Wheels feet. I would bump like a turtle on its back. I just sucked. Thank God I could cut a promo, because everything else was terrible.
What was the time scale between you weighing, what did you say, 205, 210, something like that, to weighing 262?
Probably less than 6 months.
Wow.
But I went from 262 to 192 in a year, and then hovered around 199 to 200 and a little bit more than that. So when I came back, I had a Sunday Night Heat match tagging with Just Incredible versus Big Show. Or initially, I think, no, the first one was against the Hardy Boys. Then we did a tag team match against Big Show. Then Raven and I tug against the Hardys. These are all live heats before the pay-per-view, which is a really kind of a high-pressure spot. It's live TV before the initial pay-per-view starts. So they put me in a high-pressure position. But when I come back from those matches, things started to turn around. So just a little advice for anybody out there, whether you're selling insurance like my buddy Donovan Morgan, he was very heavy, overweight, didn't take care of himself. He was selling insurance and financial planning. His business was bottomed out. He lost a ton of weight. He got healthy, started working out, got a haircut that cleaned him up and everything. His business turned around instantly to something the way if you're healthy and you take care of yourself, people can sense that confidence and that work that you put in.
You told me the story before where, someone would come up to you and say, "Hey, it'd be good if you put on a bit of weight," that kind of thing. I alluded to it beforehand as well. I, apparently mistakenly, had always assumed that coincided with Right to Censor.
Where, it'd be good if you put on a bit of muscle.
Not to put on weight. That was before and after. Actually, the gaining 20 pounds was when I was super lean. I'd say this. I didn't get too much of that. I got a little bit of this and that about getting into shape and you'll get a push. But then afterwards, as I was back and I was basically as lean as I could be, they once in a while would say, and I can understand it, maybe put a little meat on, you look skinny. But for me, if I gained 1 pound, I would go nuts. Because the other way was, like I said, 5 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 40, then it becomes 60. Didn't want to do that again.
So, how did you lose it then? How did you lose all the weight?
Hour cardio a day. We went to HWA for Les Thatcher. Great guy, by the way, great teacher, great legend in the business. And funny story about that, if you want to make this a clip. Myself, Bill DeMott, Tommy Dreamer, land in Cincinnati to go to HWA. We're in our rental car. A bus is in an accident on the side of the road, and the bus is, I think, smoking, like starting to catch fire. They couldn't open the doors to the bus. Bill DeMott got the doors open. Dreamer, myself, and Bill DeMott, before we even got to the wrestling school, had rescued a busload of passengers. It's so weird. I was like, all right, well, this is off to a crazy start. Little did I know, we got the lessons. Everybody was very nice. We got to, I think we met AJ Styles. AJ Styles was there as well. A bunch of guys that are probably on TV today. We get, kind of acclimated, meet everybody, do a little bit of training, and get back to the hotel room. Crash Holly was there too. I don't know how many people. I know Crash was one and a few other people. Crash came over and he said, I just got a call from Johnny Ace. He just cut my pay by a lot. And then he called me as Crash was there. And I answered the phone. And Crash is in the background screaming, cut his pay, Johnny. He sucks. Cut his pay. He cut my pay. This was one of the times I was about to get 125 and they cut me back down to 75. In this sense, though, I appreciate them doing that because it made me hungry again. I had not earned the right to earn extra money at that point. So for me, this was like, and then with JR saying, you're going back down there, you're going to prove yourself. We still might release you. Well, I could work indies, I could work Japan, and then TNA was actually, they weren't in business yet, but usually there's a company that's going to pop up eventually. So it gave me great motivation. Sometimes twice a day, I would do 30 minutes of cardio. I carb depleted. I was drinking a lot of Isopure shakes. I was basically on a carnivore diet in a way. Just no fat, no carbs, all protein, and the weight just came off. To the point where, now I'm going to tell you right now, just like I said before, that was the beginning of me doing sometimes unrepairable damage or irreparable damage to my adrenals because my sleep got screwed up and all that. But to me, it was just like the end justifies the means with this outside of doing any PEDs. Now, did I drink pre-workout? Did I take stuff that had ephedra in it and things? Yeah, of course, because back then it was legal, but I didn't abuse it. And I knew it was bad because after an hour cardio, I was like, I can get back on for another hour. And Bill DeMott would pick me up by my waist and carry me out of the gym and goes, no, young man, you have to leave the gym. Walk away from the recumbent bike. That there too, if I could say this too, that you talk about the worst, Tale of Two Cities, the best of times, worst of times. The worst of times was to write the Censor. And I completely lost the camaraderie, the brotherhood, the fun of the wrestling business. Going back to developmental with Dreamer, Bill DeMott, Crash, Justin Credible was there. I think Ginger, there was a ton of people there. The camaraderie and the brotherhood and the encouragement and the competitive, friendly one-upmanship of everything and wanting to raise each other up. I fell back in love with the business and I fell back in love with being a part of the locker room and one of the boys. It was really great.
Speaking of being one of the, it's probably really terrible way to get back into it, but two of the boys in the locker room, two of the most popular, well, maybe not two of the most popular in certain circumstances, the Acolyte Protection Agency, the APA. You are one of the, along with Godfather and Buchanan, you have some memorable matches, you have some memorable, and you even said it before, when you were clearing out the APA's backstage area of all the beer cans and stuff like that, and then Godfather's about to smoke the cigar and you give him the look, you tell him not to. What would the APA like to work with? Because this is really sort of the absolute peak of their popularity as a tag team. And as I say once again, Bradshaw's got some detractors. I spoke to him quite a few times. He's a really nice guy, tons of fun to talk to and that kind of thing as well. But your experiences with Farouk and Bradshaw?
Well, the experience, I have different eras of experience with Bradshaw. As you can see, working the Right to Censor, then working the hardcore title, and then just general matches here and there with John. And then, of course, fast forward to the Blue Meanie stuff and everything from One Night Stand and then SmackDown. it was not an easy night. It was not a night off with those guys. And that era of wrestlers too, they can either be rough with you in a safe way or just be rough with you in general. During the Right to Censor days, they were kind of rough with me in general. But then again, if you look at it from Bradshaw and Farouk's point of view, I'm getting heavier. I'm looking lazy. My work is suffering. I'm not really bumping crisps. I'm not really there for things I should be there for with my timing, and all the chemistry was off. They weren't trying to per se hurt me or triple me or anything like that, but I think they're very much old school style wrestlers in that regard. Bradshaw's a rough dude to wrestle. Impossible? No, not at all. I got the different iterations, like say the Right to Censor stuff. I didn't wrestle Bradshaw a whole lot, but I got physicality like after the match with the APA doing stuff to me or the Dudleys putting me through a table. Then when I wrestled him with the hardcore stuff, he was there with everything, but it just felt different. But then again, I was in much better shape. I could recover. I could take punishment. I wasn't just some doughboy that was getting thrown around like a piece, for all I know, when they picked me up too, I might have unintentionally dead-assed them and been a sandbag because I wasn't able to control the extra 50 to 60 pounds that I had. So Bradshaw's got the reputation. He's done stuff. I witnessed it. There was a little hazing stuff like I talked about in the beginning. I think Bradshaw just busts balls, for lack of a better term. He just messes with you. If you sell it to a certain extent, he's going to keep doing it. That's just anybody. And also, they're Undertaker's buddies. Undertaker is the judge at Wrestler's Court. He's the leader of the locker room. These guys are the enforcers. Now, you can look at years after people like the APA are in the locker room, or people like Bradshaw, the enforcers, the policemen. You could maybe put Bob Holly in that kind of category as policing wrestlers that kind of fall out of line. But my question out there, and people can comment below, would you rather have it be that way, or would you rather have AEW where it is a complete wild, wild west scenario and nobody's kept in check? I don't quite have a good answer. There's so many positives to the current generation of locker rooms where you really can be made to be the best, and you can be the best with less stress. But then again, other people that in certain ways take advantage of the current system, and you see things like, the brawl out thing, the press conference, people chirping back and forth. People like Bradshaw, Farouk, Bob Holly, and other people can keep those things in check too. So they can be considered to be an evil sometimes, but in certain points, they have to be a necessary evil depending upon what era that your wrestling career is in.
With Farouk and Bradshaw, I've got 3 moves written down here. I always wince at a Bradshaw powerbomb because I can always put myself in that position where you try and tuck your head and just the force bounces your head back anyway. But the powerbomb, the clothesline, or Farouk's spine buster, which of those were just like, oh no, you could never get away from the fact that they just hurt.
I've never been powerbombed by Bradshaw, which is great because you want to talk about my dead fat ass going. I take powerbombs awful. Like I took Undertaker's Last Ride, the worst that anybody ever took it. I'm always tempted, like at least once every month when I think about whatever Taker's matches pop up on YouTube. I'm like, I just want to call this guy and apologize because I know I sucked. I owe him that much. Like I would love to just give him a good Last Ride bump just to make up for, even if we just did it on a pad in a wrestling school. Okay, I sat up. I didn't dead ass shit. Here's the thing with Bradshaw with the clothesline. He can throw it any way he wants to. And I've been on both sides where some have been pretty rough. And once again, that could be being out of shape. The hardcore title stuff, he had it down to where it was literally a shoulder block. And this would kind of pop through. But to me, that makes a great worker because even when I would look at it before I took it, I'm like, oh my God, he's taking the guy's head off. But when I got in there and took it and felt the shoulder and then his forearm across the other end, and he kind of brings it in an upward trajectory, And then I would make sure that my legs would go over my head because then he'd be like, okay, I don't need to give him a second one. How's that? The scariest move for me that I took really bad on a SmackDown, I came out as the APA with the UPN symbol on that, was the Dominator. I cannot backflip to save my life. Once again, this big fat ass I have. And I got pogo sticked, and it was totally my fault. So Farouk's Spinebuster, I never took it, but it's no different than Batista's. You're slamming down every bit as hard as Hunter, Arn, anybody else, but because there's so much bounce, he pops up to his feet like Batista and makes it look like he drove you through the mat. It's not any stiffer than getting the wind knocked out of you by anybody else.
Should we save the
Now the kick to the kidney? I wouldn't have him kick me like he did on Matt Johnson. That would not be something I would be happy about.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that really well. But that was back in the days when, something would happen and they would replay it week after week after week. You could never forget it, which I sort of miss those days. I know they're like more basic. Maybe it's rose-tinted glasses. I just like the way they presented TV back in the old days.
Well, Ahmed was out. I mean, if you showed that a million times, it's like Chad Gable literally getting shot in the head backstage in the girl position and then winning his match next week. So you can't play it all the time because you expose how phony it is.
Is this a good time to bring up, because you've already mentioned it, The Undertaker Last Ride from Hell? Is it right? So in my mind's eye, I thought it was Taka Michinoku where Undertaker shows Kane how to do the last ride. But then I read something that it was you.
Oh, no, it wasn't me.
Person.
No, it wasn't him showing. I remember that. He wasn't showing. He needed Glenn's help to get me up. And I was really, really embarrassed. And probably that's, I don't blame Undertaker if he does dislike or hate me or doesn't appreciate me as a worker. But that did stick in the back of my mind. Taking that last ride really terrible. That was one of the things. And I think it wasn't long after that the Ivory incident happened on the weight scale in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I got sick and tired of being sick and tired. There was no way to go up to Taker, even though I probably did apologize and he was like, whatever, and walked away, which he should. What am I going to say? The only thing I could do to show any kind of remorse, not only to my own self to get healthy, but show the boys that, yeah, I know I'm being terrible right now with my bumps and all that stuff. The weight loss, all that stuff will hopefully turn it around for me. Now, I don't think I've had 4 conversations with Taker, including the one after the chair shot to JBL. I didn't have too many run-ins with him. Our conversations may have lasted 90 seconds the most, and that's about it.
Going to talk about a couple more things relating to Right Censor. We'll close down the show. So, SummerSlam 2000, it's sort of the big pay-per-view coming out party, as it were, for Right Censor. You get a big win over Rikishi and Too Cool. And I, for whatever reason, had thought this happened at WrestleMania 17, where you fly in, do the big the Steven kick.
I missed a big Stevie kick. Missed it by a mile. I'm so... bad memories in this episode.
Oh, God. Oh, well, take us through the entire thing. Because it's a great finish because, Right to Censor is all about pouring cold water on what the fans want to see. And Scotty Too Hotty is doing the worm. He's doing the machinations. He's doing the hopping around. And then you just launch him with the super kick. And, a sound is made. He goes down and you get the pin. And everybody is very, very disappointed. But, it's a great finish. But apparently you don't have the same memories that I do of it then.
I don't, because I completely missed them. And once again, we can go, I wasn't quite overweight yet, but I wasn't exactly in shape. The outfit, I can blame anything for anything. But my real motivation was that I didn't want to hurt Scotty. He's a really nice guy. I liked him. I don't know how he felt about me, at the time, but I threw the kick and that was my spot. I came up with that as far as WOR, and I hit it because I could hit it out of anywhere in ECW. So it was like, okay, this is cool. But I completely missed him because I didn't want to touch him. Rather than crying. And when he's like this and sideways, it's kind of weird. So I could have taken his head off, but it's one of those things I wish I could go back and fix, but it was just another thing to remember when I wanted to lose the weight and I wanted to get back into being at least a decent worker, you know, when I returned.
So we'll talk about Val Venis then. So Val Venis.
I'm so bad at ruining your compliments, aren't I?
Well, yeah, I mean,
You're like, you're a really
Regrets
big
I've
part
had
of
a
the
few.
show in ECT. You're a big part of the show in ECT. No, actually, I sucked. Oh, you're finished, and a Stevie kick was so pointed. No, I actually missed it. I'm sorry, I'm killing all your.
No, I'm in fairness, I did see you miss it, but it still looked good. That's not the point.
You knew,
It was great.
you politicker.
What can I say? Anyway, I'm on your side, dude. I'm on
Hey,
your
I'm
side.
on your side too. I'm on your side.
Right, let's talk.
Cost of materials for housing products in England is too high, and I'm going to do something about it.
Do it. Run for something. Run for something. Dude, right. Okay, last thing. Val Venis. This is before SummerSlam, but he becomes the newest member of the Right to Censor after the Right to Censor kidnap him. I think people forget with the Val Venis character that, and I asked him this, and I said, dude, why'd you cut your hair? You know, because I was like, you know, you wrestled in Mexico. I mean, for goodness sake. I've asked this for other people as well. I mean, I've not asked this for you, or maybe I did. Heath Slater, I've asked, why didn't you cut your hair in the ring, make a big thing about it, you know? And I know Vince McMahon really hates that, apparently, because that's wrestling.
Not sports entertainment, you know, like putting your hair on the line for a title or a match.
I have to laugh because Vince was in one of the biggest matches in WrestleMania history where he did the wrestling thing of having. Okay, am I missing that? Did that not happen? He had his head shaved in the middle of the ring.
Unbelievable, isn't it? Well, you know, depends what day he wakes up, I guess.
Spot.
I tell you what, they did that with Molly Holly as well, and that was great. But I don't know why they don't do it more. I don't.
Dude,
it's like
that
Ed
sucked
stand-up
for
and short
her.
hair.
That sucked for her and Victoria. They were literally shaving her head on the ramp, on the stage, WrestleMania 20, right?
21 maybe. 20. That's going to
Or
put me. Might be
22.
21.
20 or 20. All right. They're shaving her head up on the stage, and the next match comes out as Victoria shaving her head. They glossed over a girl getting her head shaved. Am I remembering that wrong?
No, you remember it right. It was 20 as well. My apologies. You were right. I don't know.
Yes, I
don't know if
remember
it was-
something, finally.
I'm
WrestleMania
When-
20 in 1894. Oh, no, that's not the right year.
do you know what? It might have been Edge and Kurt Angle the next year or the year before. Damn it, I can't remember.
Hey, for
I know
somebody who
they
hates
did
that
it.
wrestling head shaving, he did an awful lot.
I know, but that's the thing. Like, I'm sure he's told certain people about, you know, putting the hair on line. Anyway, the point is that Val Venis.
X-Pac and Jeff
What's the Sarah?
Jarrett, too, did one.
That was in '98 though. That's still when that was wrestle. But that was when wrestling was wrestling still, just about.
Yeah, I remember when wrestling was wrestling. Wow, these kids.
So anyway, he's cut his hair. He's already dropped entirely the Val Venis character while still being called Val Venis. He was teaming with like Trish Stratus. I think the Rikishi splash off the cage was mere weeks earlier. Then he comes out and says that he's not going to join the Right to Censor. Not interested whatsoever. And then you guys kidnap him.
Time for some conversion therapy, baby.
Well, I mean, whatever you told him must have worked. So what do you think of Val joining him? How do you think his presentation meshed with the rest of you so far?
I have a bit of a theory on that. And it goes in line with what I'm talking about with my work rate not being up to snuff as the leader of the group, not looking the part, not being favored in the locker room, nor in the office, it seems. And Val had a very different outfit, all white, that had him stand out. I believe it was either going to be him, and actually, we can talk about in episode 2 or the second part, I was pushing for Ivory to be the new leader, to give a different spin on it, to give it new life. But I believe they were looking, if not to release me and get rid of me completely, to make Val the leader of the group. It just gave, I had this hunch. He was turned, he looks different, he stands out, he can talk, he can wrestle. I would think about it too. My vote would be for Ivory because having a woman lead a bunch of guys is the next iteration of a cult. There's no real female cult leaders out there that are well known. She could have really picked that up. And she's a bossy lady anyway, so she could definitely boss all us around. That's my theory, though. Now, you can, with your memory, do you see that lining up as maybe almost being the case that Val was being groomed to be the new leader of the RTC?
No, and I'll tell you why. Because I asked Val exactly that. And I said, why did you have white trousers when everyone else had black? And he just said, and I don't know if there was more behind it, like to what you're thinking of, but he said, I just wanted to stand out in the group more. Which, in fairness, really wasn't his place to stand out in the group more, but he took it apparently upon himself just to give himself a different look.
Yeah, but they had to approve that. They have to approve that. That stands out literally like a sore thumb. So for him to say that, maybe he doesn't remember it correctly, or maybe he wasn't sure, but just for the office saying, yes, you can stand out from this entire group where the leader is wearing the same stuff as the other guys and girl. Now, I think I stand by that theory, and I say Right to Censor would have been better with Val Venis as the leader for that time, and even better with Ivory. That's why I'm not good.
Why
good
trying
politics.
to replace yourself with? I was going to say, why are you trying to replace yourself as the leader of? You were absolutely great in that role. You know you were.
Because my whole thing right there, especially with the environment and the way that most of the locker room, if not the office, felt about me and the character and the group, I thought we could buy ourselves another 6 months to a year with a talent. And Godfather could have been the leader, with somebody that was favored in the locker room and the office, to where they weren't constantly having people murmur, are you sure? You sure? These guys aren't over. Look at this guy. I was trying to eliminate any excuse to disband the group. Then we're all out of work, potentially. I was looking at it strictly from, I want this run to continue at any cost, even if it's my ego.
Here's the thing, though. It's like,
it's
if you
so
weren't the
not
leader
pro.
of it,
Can you see now why I don't fit in?
Your heat in the group was essentially, one, you weren't being touched, but you were the guy that could be beaten. You were the guy who, if they could just get their hands on you, kind of thing. And I was just, you talking then, I was thinking a couple of years earlier, Don Callis, when he was the Jackal. And he, as we were talking before, Bull Buchanan.
he was part of that group as well, and he was the leader and everything. But
dude, Don got it 10 or 100 times worse than I could ever have a nightmare about getting. The way he didn't even dress, he dressed outside in his car. He was put through the ringer.
Why Don though?
I don't know. I mean, different personality, different cat. Everybody. It's so funny in wrestling that we want unique, different characters, but everybody needs to be the same in the locker room. Nobody can have their little goofy, freaky idiosyncrasies or anything like that.
I mean, you had the same thing as Don Callis in the sense of you were smaller than the guys that you managed. You were sort of like a player coach in the sense that you would wrestle, but for the most, but you were seen as the guy who led the charge for the bigger guys to wrestle, and then, you know, the big thing at the end of the match would be they get to you or, you know, attack you and that kind of thing, and everyone would leave very, very happy. So it wouldn't have made sense if you were just another guy in the group. You had to be the leader in that sense.
Yeah, but I was just looking at getting booked continually. I was sacrificing that part of it for the creative liberty of putting me in a spot where I'd still be in the group. Now, they could have just got rid of me. Would people remember or forget, or if they never mentioned it, who knows? But yeah, I mean, that's the classic, the smallest guy with the biggest mouth, and then the big guys do the bidding. That's easy heat. But imagine if a woman did that. That's why I'm still sticking by the Ivory thing. Imagine if a woman was a complete bitch, bossy, telling people what to do, but had the backup of these big dudes.
We are going to be talking about Ivory. I think that we're going to save Ivory for the next episode, you know. Is there anything else you want to talk about Val Venis, Sean Morley's run in Right to Censor at this point that you thought he brought to the table? Or, I mean, did he like being in the group?
No, not at all. No,
He hated wearing the shirt.
was
I know that. He hated wearing it.
you know, I know people can't understand why this wasn't an absolutely awesome, fun time for me. I know it's a mystery. Nobody wants to be around you. Nobody wants to be in your group. Nobody wants to do the business. But Val is definitely
What was his problem? What was his problem? Because he wasn't particularly doing anything. He was actually at the time a bland mid-card heel. This gave him a bit more purpose.
And I think he was Intercontinental Champion too when he was right to Censor, right? He was before, but he was IC champ. I was the only one that couldn't win a belt, and they weren't going to put the world title on me. So the problem, I think, still Val had maybe the same. I look at Val and Godfather the same way, as baby faces that are over, that draw, and more importantly, convert merchandise sales. I think they had Val Venis t-shirts, towels, hello ladies. If you said it today, well, maybe not today with everything online with social media, but if he said hello ladies, you would immediately know who that is. One of the most identifiable characters in wrestling history. And he, as a babyface, was making a ton of money. So I'm sure Val took a pay cut going to right to Censor, even more of a pay cut from his generic white tights IC title run.
Maybe so. He goes back to the Val Venis character. It's very weird, his character arc, because he's Val Venis, then he's just Val Venis but serious, then he's the right to censor Val Venis, and then he's like Godfather, he disappears, and then he reappears at the same event, Royal Rumble 2002, and then for whatever reason, he's the big Val Boski, but his character is completely neutered from what it was before. They don't do the funny vignettes and the backstage stuff anymore. He's strictly a heat wrestler, and then all of a sudden he becomes Chief Morley, which he doesn't like either. And then after that, he's just Val Venis on the undercard for a few years, and he's just another guy. And that character had so much steam in 1998 and 1999 to then just be Val Venis in name only, in that sense.
Yeah, I remember. I forget event, if it was Survivor Series or something like that. He and D'Lo had one of the best matches, and it was an opening match on the card for the
SummerSlam '98. I remember it.
Yeah, was that the European or was it the Intercontinental title?
European.
Dude, that match,
Triple H and The Rock.
That match is one of the best matches I've ever seen. Those guys were awesome. With Val too, I don't know. I will say this: he went on to wrestle me in a best out of 1,000 on Sunday Night Heat. We wrestled one of my favorite, and then Val's kind of like a Bradshaw in a way. His stuff is there. It's strong style, but we could appreciate it. There was a very fine line, and him and Bradshaw could do it. And, they could be rough and look rough and tough and strong style, but in a work sense. I can't explain it. It's just that it factor, and Val definitely had it.
He lost the match via disqualification after 15 minutes, 24 seconds. In the opener, a DQ in the opener. But it was a great match. That one definitely sticks out to me. Right, okay, I think we're going to close down the show at this point, and we're going to tease episode 2 of The Right to Censor. What are we going to be talking about in episode 2 of The Right to Censor? The downfall, as you called it.
The downfall. The downfall and the beginning of the hair growing back.
So what can we look forward to in that episode?
Well, we're going to talk about the backstage stuff and how one writer in the WWF at the time may have been the reason that The Right to Censor went away after Jacob Israel went away. Because of the way these two writers did not get along. You know how it is with, hey, even though these guys have nothing to do with it, I don't like you, so I'm going to get rid of them. And it was the beginning of the end. We only have one advocate anyway. So that also, I'm just trying to think. There's different things. I'll need a few days to really recall that. These are very, very compartmentalized, suppressed memories that you're reminding me of.
Therapy. Therapy is what this is. Let me tell you.
Oh, you're the new Dr. Stevie, professional therapist.
We're going to talk about Ivory joining. We're going to be talking about the feud with China. We're going to be talking the Dudley boys joining and then not joining. We're going to be talking about more stuff like that for now. But We didn't even do we're totally off our game just because of all my computer things. We didn't even do like the plugs for the intro, so we best sort of do the plugs for the outro. So I've got 2 books linked in the description. Cameos and stuff for you, Stevie. What else?
I am working right now with your help. Thank you very much, James, on redesigning and reconfiguring patreon.com/Stevie Richards, where the whiteboard, a dedicated whiteboard segment, will be on that. So it's going to be exclusive content. We talked a little bit before the episode. We're going to talk a little bit after the episode. We may put that up as a little bit of a bonus pre and post show. Also, I'm going to do behind the scenes stuff on Patreon where I actually take you through how I'm editing the assets and doing stuff, some of the editing of the actual shows and things like that. Excuse me. Also, in a future video, I think we're going to kind of give, basically our behind the scenes workflow on how the show works, include Chris in there, our, clickbait editor, and who's to blame for what on the team. How's that? Because I'm getting blamed for all the thumbnails right now. I'd love to take credit for them, but that's about it. If you can go to patreon.com/Stevie Richards, right now, billing is paused. Nobody's getting charged right now, but you can always sign up as a free member. We are going to have previews and other sneak peeks so you can see exactly if it's something you want to support. We have a coaching tier as well for independent wrestlers, or if you're a fan that wants a breakdown of a particular match or moment and be educated, that's going to be added on the Patreon. But that's about it.
Okay, then. So, you do the outro I'll do the outro this time. Listen, everybody, thank you so much for watching. We're on all podcast platforms as well as full episodes every single Friday, and we do a few clips as well that we try our best to make interesting and deep dives here and there. I do realise that we didn't do a whiteboard segment this week. This is just sort of a 1 week thing, really, because of just technical limitations on my part. Everything should be all right by next week, hopefully, anyway. And Stevie's going to wear his white shirt and a black tie next week to celebrate the end of Right to Censor. I might do as well. So, like our formal dress, our door, our cold calling, door knocking on.
Time to hit the thrift store, baby.
Do you not have a shirt? Like, obviously, you're like Bart Simpson. It's like you've just got like a wardrobe full of the exact same clothes.
I really do. I have like 10 of these tank tops, soccer shorts, whatever, and I don't even have shoes on right now, so I got to vacuum the carpet afterwards because I sweat. It's like 100 degrees in the studio.
I was going to say, how dirty are your feet, man?
They're not dirty. They're sweaty.
I'm wearing...
People don't need to know this unless...
I'm wearing Project Rock shorts.
This here is Tony Atlas's favorite part of the show right now.
What, the shoe wear?
Yeah, the shoe and the feet thing.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm going to give you this.
I've got this old pair of trainers, right, that are so old, right? There was like a sharp piece of plastic that was ripping into my feet there that I had to get a pair of tin snips.
Oh, that's a little, like, it looks like a rope, but it's plastic. It digs right into you.
Yes. So that was fun, but that'll just go to show you how cheap I am, Like, we're basically having, who was the cheapest out of the both of us, I think, on this one. At least in shoe wear, I like to think I've got the edge on that.
You don't go to Poshmark for used Brooks, so there.
No.
I win. Ha ha. Ha ha.
Okay, spell your name, JARRETT. Right, we're going to close down the show. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you again next week.